quiero presentarles a Mary. Digital River, ahora ya va a ser una presentación, pero es una de los grandes líderes en lo que es Global Commerce y Global Payments. Tiene de clientes a importantísimas empresas como Microsoft, Samsung, Electronic Arts. Y bueno, queríamos conocer la visión desde los líderes y cómo ven no solo el e-commerce y los e-payments, sino las tendencias de movilidad.
Buenos dias, me llamo Mary Suddendorf. That's unfortunately as far as my Spanish goes. So please bear with me. But in regards to, thank you, first off, I'd like to say thank you to GlobalLogic. Thank you for inviting me to actually share some insights that we have inside of the commerce industry. So just enterprise commerce as well as mobile commerce. Just a little background about myself. I actually focus on the business strategy for Digital River in regards to our mobile commerce capabilities and the expansion of our enterprise commerce capabilities, specifically to our largest clients, including clients like we mentioned before, Microsoft, Samsung, Trend Micro, and others. In today's agenda, it's a brief overview trying to set expectations for all the different components that we'll be discussing. The first piece is a Digital River overview because we don't have a local presence inside of Argentina. And so we just want to do a brief overview just to make sure that everyone understands exactly what Digital River does, the background in which we actually provide that content and that information, so you can make sure that you have that perspective. We're also going to talk about overall mobile commerce as a percentage of revenue inside of the e-commerce plus mobile commerce space. In addition to that, what's on the minds and hearts of many of you is the research and development, specifically regarding the actual spend inside of research and development inside of the mobile market. So you can see exactly how retailers are actually investing inside of that, how retailers are, and I should say are not, investing in some of these pieces, and the response to that. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about Digital River's expertise, because anytime I think about market statistics, I also bring it back to Digital River to make sure that even though we have these broad-based, broad-brush statistics, I like to make sure that they're validated based off of what I'm seeing at the consumer and the business user level. And then finally, we'll talk about the top trends that I believe from a business perspective that are going to be pretty hot in the upcoming years of 2013 all the way through 2016. So to get started, Digital River, high-level overview. Digital River is a global e-commerce organization. We enable clients from a white-labeled perspective. So inside of that commerce, we were founded in 1994. We are a public organization traded on NASDAQ. We do about 400 million net revenue. Now that translates to about 13 billion US dollars in gross revenues that we actually transact. So that net revenue is actually what we're taking from those transactions. Inside of that global footprint, when we look at our people, process, and technology, it's really that combination of those three components that actually allow us to scale to that 13 billion in online sales. We do hosted experiences inside of a B2C environment as well as B2B. So these are just some screenshots of user experiences, and this goes across devices. For example, for the B2C consumers, you'll see Panasonic over on the far right-hand side. That's actually being displayed via smart television. And so inside of that, Digital River is enabling the commerce components inside of that marketplace. And then in addition to that, we also do the outlets, the employee stores, the B2B portals, marketplaces, and so forth. And so that's just kind of a day in the life of what we actually manage. And now how we manage that. We manage that allowing our clients to have a single point into Digital River, a single point into that single catalog, and then we spread across the array of different offerings that we do. We do that because of scale, and we'll talk more about scale in the future as to specifically on mobile investments, about how you need to scale from a mobile investment perspective. Of course, because I do know that we've got quite a few IT people in the room, of course we're going to talk a little bit about IT. Now, how does Digital River do that? Digital River does that through 8 triple redundant data centers. We've made our own miniature cloud. And so inside of those 8 triple redundant data centers, we've got an active network environment. We also, when we look at our daily stats, just kind of going back to a day in the life, we do over 300,000 orders per day. And so when, let's say, Electronic Arts as EA, they are one of the largest global gaming publishers. And when they spike as to having a spike of a new game being released, we've got to be able to flex in order to support them. And so that's the reason why we have had to build that miniature cloud. So just a couple stats about what we do and how we actually do that. And I wanted to give you that background so then you can understand how I'm applying those pieces inside of the forecast for 2013 through 2016. So again, we've now reviewed the Digital River overview, and we'll jump right into the mobile payments and mobile commerce. Now, this is just for Latin America, and this is actually in millions for US dollars. When we look at 2013 looks to be about $70 billion. 70 billion US dollars that is forecasted for mobile commerce as well as e-commerce in total. If you look at 2011, the forecast was 35 million. You succeeded that and actually went above and beyond that at about 22% over the forecast and came in at approximately $43 million in US dollars. And so if you just look at Latin America specifically, you're exceeding growth expectations. And then on top of that, if you look at mobile commerce, now you'll see mobile commerce is small. But mobile commerce is actually rapidly growing, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the upcoming slides. But right now in 2011, in Latin America, mobile commerce was about 4 to 5% of the total e-commerce revenues. However, in the United States, we were only 2%. So when you look at that, you guys are actually, you're accelerating the United States by over 100%, right? So when you look at those pieces and how Latin America is actually adopting, that adoption rate is much greater in Latin America than we're actually seeing inside the United States, just based off some of the historical statistics that we're seeing. Now when you look at the mobile payments forecast. Now I just want to make a note here. When we look at mobile payments, this is not including carrier billing. Okay, this is including bank accounts, this is including money transfers, credit cards, prepaid cards, gift cards. Specifically, when you look at this growth rate of 265%, that's a pretty rapid percentage growth year over year, and that adoption, it just continues to focus on that adoption rate being great. Of this, about 3% is sitting in Latin America, and about like 34%, let's say, is actually coming from Africa. And so when you're looking at that, a lot of this revenue is actually coming from money transfers as well as merchandise purchases. Okay, so that's really what's driving this growth right now. Now, of course, like I had mentioned before, anytime I look at overall statistics, I have to go and take that back home to where I can actually see the user data from my own analytics engine. And so with that, I started looking at just the PC versus the mobile users, and I'm seeing the same type of distribution as I'm seeing in revenue. That's justifying that those revenue forecasts are definitely what we're seeing inside of what we're seeing from a user experience. Digital River focuses on consumer electronics, digital goods, and games. So that's a comprehensive view of exactly what we're seeing. We're definitely seeing, I will say, when you start to cut down those sectors as to consumer electronics versus games, we're definitely seeing higher growth rates or higher percentages sitting inside of a games environment than we are sitting inside of the consumer electronics. So just to give clarification on that. Research and development. Because I'm part of the product strategy of Digital River, this is definitely something that I have ownership of, and so I understand that a lot of you have this ownership as well. You have the burden as well as the gratification that comes with research and development. When we look at the mobile environment, right now, Forrester did a retail study. That retail study actually showed that 50% of the retailers that they were interviewing spent $100,000 USD or less for their smartphones. Of that, so I just want to make sure I get my stats right. Of that, so 50% spent $100,000 or less on their smartphones. 74% actually spent $100,000 or less on their tablet environments. Okay? And so when we start to look at this, and then of that total percentage, 14% of those retailers didn't spend a dime. They didn't spend 1 peso inside of that. As well as for smartphones, 18% didn't spend a peso inside of their inside of their tablet R&D investment. So when you start to look at that, as much as we're seeing some great growth, we're not seeing a lot of great adoption inside of a research and development perspective. Now, the question that you'll probably have is why? Why are we not seeing that? Well, it's because these technologies that we've enabled inside of smartphones and the tablets, they're able to consume our standard web experience, but it's just not optimal. And so what people are trying to do is they're trying to get an ROI investment, right? So they're trying to get a return on investment of their R&D spend, typically what we do inside of our sites today. But they're having that hard time, and that hard time is because we're only seeing, for example, in Latin America, we're only seeing 4% of the revenues coming from mobile commerce. And so that's the challenge, right? That's the balancing challenge that happens inside of here. We'll talk more about the trends that we're seeing based off of that, but that's really why we're seeing a lot of these, just inside of this retail study, why they're not spending inside of that. So now let's talk about the future. Of course, now that we've got the groundwork of exactly what we're looking at from a market perspective, now let's talk about what we're seeing from a trends perspective. I've got my top 5. This is how I usually approach this inside of the strategy, is that I want to make sure I have my top 5, and then of course I prioritize that. Inside of my top 5, if I look at just the revenue growth, there is going to be an insurmountable amount of revenue growth when it comes to 235%. Do I believe that it's going to be higher than 235%? Absolutely I do. And that's because Latin America is already showing us that you guys already came in 22% above what was originally forecasted for 2011. And so with that massive adoption of new tablets, new devices, new operating systems, everyone is starting to adopt and being able to have more of an upgrade strategy. Your consumers are starting to look at it saying, what's the next device am I going to have? And because of that adoption, I do believe that we're going to have much higher revenue growth than what's currently forecasted. So then inside of that revenue growth, the major thing that's going to happen is that you're still going to have to pull out that ROI. With only 4% of the actual revenues coming in from mobile commerce, you're still going to have to try to pull back how much investment that you want to make inside of that. Now let's talk about that investment. So my number 4 is investment. Investment is definitely one of those pieces from a technology side that you can start to span yourself. You can get into responsive designs. This is just one of the responsive designs that I had pulled out. So a responsive design is that you create once and then you apply to many. And so having that responsive design allows you not to invest greatly on putting up single siloed user experiences and more flexible user experiences. It allows you to prepare for the future, because what happens when that new device comes out and now your user experience isn't optimal for that new device? So you just don't know what the next screen resolution is going to be. So with that, you've got to be able to prepare for that. And then HTML5, of course, as we know, there's a lot of closed ecosystems out there. And inside of that HTML5 also allows you, if you want to go into applications themselves, it allows you that flexibility of being able to span across multiple devices rather than being in a siloed device, like creating for Apple or creating for Google or creating for Microsoft or others. Being able to actually stretch your design, stretch your dollar, because that's what's going to happen. Until mobile revenue gets to be a significant size, the investment that needs to happen is really going to be from a scale perspective rather than an outlay of incremental dollars. Organizational alignment. This is one of the pieces that I've started to, when inside of my research, I was finding out that sometimes the mobile experiences are owned by the CMO. Sometimes the mobile experiences are owned by the CIO. And sometimes the mobile experiences are owned by the product managers. While you have a fragmented approach inside of who owns which pieces, and when I say who owns which pieces, it could be that everyone owns one piece of their own, and they're going out on their own. So, for example, eBay. eBay has a bunch of different mobile initiatives inside of their organization. They don't have one cohesive go-to-market. So that's something to think about in 2013 to 2016. As your investment dollars are not going to be very great inside of the mobile, you have to scale from a technology perspective inside of responsive design, HTML5 and others, is also to look at your organizational alignment because that's going to create efficiencies. That's also going to allow you to pool your dollars together for that investment from a mobile perspective. The next piece that I see inside of 2013 to 2016 is the cloud. The cloud ability for monetization. I believe that the cloud is going to be one of the main components to actually spur growth inside of the amount of revenue coming in from mobile commerce. And the reason is because when you're on your connected device, you're going to be leveraging the cloud. Anytime you leverage the cloud, right now you're not getting charged for that. But soon in the future, when usage-based subscription models come out, you're going to start to get charged for that. So we're going to see a larger amount of revenue coming in from the cloud because of cloud usage. The cloud is being used from a product expansion perspective. So for example, a client that I've had the opportunity to work with is Nuance Communications. Nuance actually does PDF converter. They've got some OCR software. Inside of that was one of their products, Paperport. It's really a PDF converter type of product in simplistic form. They're starting to use the cloud in order to have the storage space. So as much as they've had a full application that gets downloaded as a 32 or 64-bit application, they're leveraging the cloud for product expansion. That's the strategy right now, but when I look at it from an outsider looking in, I'm seeing it that they're actually going to leverage the cloud for monetization. So now as much as you're hooked, because now you've got all of your documents sitting in the cloud, now you're going to have to pay for that incremental access. So that's definitely another piece. And then customer experience. Customer experience is my #1 focus in my top 5. And the reason for that is because it is truly critical to make sure that your customer experience is specifically right on for your users. That means you have to personalize what we talked about before. And then the next piece is that you've got to focus on exactly what are your customers, what's going to be your differentiator versus your competition. And when you connect with your customers, that's more of an extension of your brand. Because when we're looking at the revenues coming in, we're not seeing a large amount of revenues, however, we're seeing foundation for success in the future. And so when we look at that success in the future, right now it's going to be more of a branding strategy, and then further on it's going to be more of a monetization strategy. But having the right customer experience, what does that mean for all of you in all these different industries that you're currently focused on? That means that you have to understand exactly how your users are engaging with you. You have to understand their wants and their needs, specifically their wants, because historically you'll know what their needs are. But you need to get their wants because you need to get that customer experience extremely specific for that user base. We're seeing more personalization because technology has allowed us to have personalization. And so with that, your users' expectations are much higher than they've ever been. And why is that? That's because OEMs, or original equipment manufacturers, have actually built these products in a seamless fashion. They're pushing design further than they ever have before. And so with that, you've got higher expectations that are being created because of the environment that your customers are living in. So that's my #1 focus for 2013 to 2016 when we look at the opportunities inside of mobile commerce. Now today I did want to open it up for a Q&A session, just a quick recap of all the components that we discussed. We discussed exactly what the investments look like. We've talked about what the revenue forecasts are, as well as what we believe the growth rates are going to be. And then supplied after that was really the top 5 initiatives when we look at 2013 to 2016 and what we need to be focused on, what's going to be near and dear to our hearts, but then also how we're going to actually be able to leverage the different technologies in the future to scale the revenue.
Thank you, Mary. No sé si tienen alguna pregunta para aprovechar mientras los panelistas se van ubicando para la próxima sesión. Si alguien quiere hacer una pregunta, le acerco el micrófono directamente. Pueden hacerla en español y la traducen, así que no hay problema, la traduzco yo.
Hello, Mary, how are you? I just have a question relating those 5 different focus areas you mentioned in the last part of the presentation. It's basically how deep is the penetration of commerce transaction orchestrating many different players through the cloud?
Yeah, so the commerce transactions, when we talk about the different players inside of that, there's going to be different pieces that you have inside of there. Because of the cloud, you're having to create an account. And when you create that user account, you can actually store their payment credentials inside that user account. So if I understand the question correctly, is really how do you scale that? And how do you actually provide a cohesive experience? When you set up those users' accounts, when you add the payment information, that allows you to monetize it in the future. And so through that monetization, the different providers that are out there, if you have your own payment gateway relationships, you can be doing that. You can be doing it via third party, and third party includes Digital River as well as others inside of that in order to enable that actual transaction to occur up in the cloud.
Thanks. So the technology investment should not only be directed to mobile applications, but to all the underlying technology that allows to run those kind of transactions.
Yep, absolutely. So in regards to the underlying technology, so when you look at the investment costs, he's absolutely right. It's going to be more of a spread or a distributed cost. Because now when you're looking at the cloud, inside of the cloud account infrastructure, you're looking at product expansion costs. So from a product perspective, expanding into that. And then you're also attributing some of that to your mobile commerce. But then you're also attributing other components, right, just for your overall retention, your acquisition and retention activities from a marketing perspective, because that's really critical.
Thank you.